Today and next week, we'll be talking about Hanukkah, certain, I would say, philosophical ideas that also apply to practical life. How a Jew lives his life and his goals, and how he looks at the important aspects of life. And in some cases, we'll be able to take these from the laws of Hanukkah themselves, together with some interpretation of how the laws work. And today I want to look at, there's a difference of opinion between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, how to light the lights of Hanukkah. We're familiar with the idea that the first night you light one, and the next night you light two, and so forth and so on, up to 8. That's Beis Hillel's view. Beis Shammai's view is the opposite. The first night you should light 8. The second night you should light 7. Third night you should light 6, and go down to 1. I don't think that's obvious, huh?
Does anyone do that?
No, no one does that. And indeed, the decisions and the difference of opinion between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, the vast majority, the Sanhedrin, voted in favor of Beis Hillel. And that means that Beis Shammai was eclipsed to the point that the Talmud says, Beis Shammai ain't a Mishnah. It doesn't count as having the force of a Mishnah. Now that's complicated. And of course, Beis Shammai's view is Torah. If you get up in the morning and you make the blessings of learning Torah and you study the whole day, Beis Shammai's view, you study Torah the whole day. But it's outvoted in a very definitive way. But the question is, what is the difference of opinion? Why would anyone think of decreasing the number? Increasing the number is just a way of, can be used as a simple way of keeping track of what day it is. And part of the idea of an 8-day festival that each day carries an extra significance. So Beis Hillel's view is very, very intuitive. What could Beis Shammai possibly have in mind to reject Beis Hillel's view and to use an order of decreasing, the first night 8, and the next night 7, and the next night 6? Why would Beis Shammai say such a thing? Now, Rav Zevin, who was a famous scholar and produced a number of works, certain encyclopedic works, including Moadim B'Halacha, the Jewish festivals in Jewish law, cites a commentary on the Mishnah which says that very often when Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai disagree about anything, they are expressing different dimensions of the reality which they are using to determine the law. And the difference, in very simple terms, is that Beis Shammai looks at the inner essence of things, and Beis Hillel looks at the way in which things make a visible effect, how they create an impression or create a reaction by exhibiting their inner character. This is true for chemistry and it's true for human beings. Lots of things that human beings are, they don't show. Some out of embarrassment, some out of humility. The question is, how do I look at the difference between... I'm giving this year now. Can I call you back? I'm giving this year now. Can I call you back? That's my better half. So I better say hello. The inner workings of a person don't always express, sometimes because of, I say, embarrassment, and sometimes because of humility. And the question is how to look at these two different dimensions. Now, we had 1 night's worth of oil and it burned for 8 nights. How did that happen? Well, there are many, many different explanations. All of them possible, none of them based on any direct evidence. The simplest one is that this oil changed its combustion properties, it burned more slowly. Even though it gave the same amount of light, it burned more slowly. So the original amount of oil lasted longer. It was, in fact, a container of oil which should have, under normal circumstances, lasted for only one night. But when they put it into the cups of the menorah and they ignited it in the morning when the lights were either extinguished, went out, or they were extinguished, they found that in each cup there was 7/8 of the oil that they put in the previous night. So that being the case, and then the next, 7/8 of the original total amount, and then another eighth disappeared the next night. That's exactly how it happened. So Beis Shammai's point of view is, what really happened here is the oil changed some of its characteristics. I know the brisker shaila, if it's miracle oil, then you can't use it for the menorah because you have to have olive oil, and olive oil is a miracle oil. Okay, that's an interesting shaila. I'm not going to go into that now. The oil's characteristics miraculously changed in how it burns. So if you ask, where is the source of the miracle? Where is the essence of the miracle? The answer is in changing the character of the oil. After that, it's just playing out the consequences of that change. So Beis Shammai asks, on the first night, how much miracle oil do you have? Well, you have enough for 8 nights, right? So the 8 candles that Beis Shammai says to light on the first night give a picture of the miracle that you have on that night. And then on the second night, you only have 7/8 left. So you light 7 candles, etc., etc. So the performance of the mitzvah is to express the essence of the miracle. Now here's the key point that Rav Zevin makes in explaining where Beis Hillel is coming from. Beis Hillel doesn't disagree with Beis Shammai that that's where the miracle took place. The miracle took place in changing the character of the oil. And they don't disagree that on the first night you have 8 nights of miracle oil. Beis Hillel says, what you say is true, but that's not what we celebrate. What we celebrate is not the inner change in the oil. What we celebrate is the effect that the oil had on the people who saw it and how it changed their view of the world and affected them. So, the first night, the nights burned for the night. Okay, they were expected to do that. Who took a look in the cups to see how much was left? I don't know. A Kohen, some Kohanim. The word spread around. Wow, listen to what they're saying. It burned all night and almost all the oil is left. That's strange. And then it happens the second night. And then it happens the third night. And then it happens the fourth night. Each night that it happens, the impact that it has grows. More people hear about it. People ask, will it happen again? After all, they didn't know that after 8 nights, they'll have newly produced pure oil. They just knew that the oil's in the menorah and it's burning and burning and burning. Now, it goes for 8 nights, and then when the 8th night is achieved, the next day, new pure oil is manufactured, is made available, so that the oil burnt just long enough so that they could have pure oil of to fill it with on their own. That in itself is a gigantic miracle, which I'm describing to you now how the observers saw it and the effect that it had on them. And especially when you take into account, as you have probably heard, that the menorah could be lit with impure oil. If there's no pure oil, you're allowed to use impure oil. So the miracle didn't occur in order to enable us to do the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. There was plenty of impure oil. They found only one small container of pure oil, and they filled the menorah with it, and it lasted just long enough to get more pure oil. Which means that the message is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to do the mitzvah in the best possible way. Not just to do the mitzvah, but to do the mitzvah in the best possible way. And as I said in the shirim of Alanissim, since there is no strict obligation to risk your life to prevent atrocities being committed in the temple, if you're asked when there's oppression to do something that's forbidden, then you may have to sacrifice your life rather than to comply. But there's no mitzvah for you to come from Beersheba to Jerusalem to do war against the Greeks in order to stop them from doing atrocities in the temple. So the fact that the war was, in a certain sense, a voluntary war, not obligatory, and it is now matched by a miracle of extending pure oil, which isn't obligatory. It's only commendable, but not obligatory. So the miracle fits the circumstances in which the war took place, and that's part of the message of the oil. The inner difference that I started with, that Beis Shammai talks about the inner change, and Beis Hillel talks about the effect of the change on others, that is a deep, general Jewish principle. I'll give you some illustrations of it where it can have even practical effects for us. Moses is on Mount Sinai, and he receives the Torah orally from Kodesh Baruch Hu. Kodesh Baruch Hu teaches him the Torah, and at the end he gives him the tablets. And as you know, at the end, the people make the golden calf. And God tells Moses to go down, and he goes down, and when he sees them celebrating the golden calf, he smashes the tablets and goes through a process of purifying them, and executes those who were guilty of idol worship. That's the general scenario. Now, when Kodesh Baruch Hu tells him to go to the people, he says, Lech reid, go get down. Kishiches amcha, because your people has done destructively, and the situation has to be addressed. So Chazal questioned the word get down, descend. He's on the top of a mountain. If he's going to go to the people who are in the valley, he's going to go down. That's obvious. Why isn't it enough for God just to say, go to the people? And Chazal explained that there's an extra meaning here. And God is saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, go down from your greatness. Go down from your greatness. Because the people has done destructively. What's the connection? The connection is this. Why was Moses great? How did he become so great? So you'll say, he worked hard on himself. That's true. But your work is your mitzvah. That's something that you need to do, and you could be rewarded for it. The result that your work will produce an effect is only a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All results of our efforts are a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can study the stocks and invest in AT&T, but if it goes up, it's not because you studied and invested. You studied and invested because Baruch Hu said, given who you are, where you are, and what you've done, I'm giving you this result. The result always comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, a person who invests in building himself and developing himself, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu crowns his efforts with success and he becomes great, what is it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's side? What is the purpose in giving him that greatness? So if you look at it simplistically, you say, look how hard he worked. He's getting it because he invested so much effort. This Chazal is telling us that that's not true. It's not because he invested the effort. Because Baruch Hu gave him the greatness as an investment in what he could do for the people. I gave you this greatness because I wanted the people to have that kind of great leader. Now they built the golden calf. So they've deteriorated. They've descended. They no longer need or deserve or can accept direction from a leader as great as you. And therefore you lose your greatness. Because your greatness wasn't just a response to your efforts. You made your efforts and I gave you the greatness to use for them. And if they can't receive it from you, then you can't give it to them. So this means that when a person elevates himself and makes progress, develops in any way whatsoever, one of the questions you ought to ask is, what can I do for other people? Who else do I know that could benefit from my example or benefit from my investment of time to explain or to advise, because the reason it's given to you is not just because of the efforts that you made. Yes, the efforts usually are necessary because Baruch doesn't give it free, but he gave it as an investment specifically that it should be used. And if it isn't used, then that removes a great purpose that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in giving it, and it jeopardizes it. If you're not going to use it, then it puts it in jeopardy. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say, I gave it to you for you to use, and you didn't use it. This is a general point of view that we have that applies in Jewish life throughout. There's a story. There was a very poor man who came to Rabbi Pramishlan, and Rabbi said, there's a rich person in such and such a city. I'll give you a letter. Take the letter to him, and he'll give you money. So the fellow took the letter and traveled to the city, and it comes to this rich person. He says, listen, I have a letter for you from Rabbi Pramishlan, and he said, you'll give me money. So he hands the letter to the wealthy fellow, and in it, the letter says, so-and-so, the bearer of this letter is my chassid. Give him such and such an amount of money from the fund I have with you. The wealthy fellow looks at the letter and he says to the Jew, I'm sorry, maybe there's some mistake here. As far as I know, Rabbi Pramishlan doesn't have any money with me. He never gave me any money. I don't know what he's referring to. There's got to be some kind of mistake. I'll give you something. I'll give you what I usually give people who come and who need help, but the amount of money he's asking for is really quite substantial. And I can't explain why he would write me such a letter. So he gave him some money, and the fellow came back to Pramishlan and said, Meir, he didn't give me the money that you told me. Now, that's the end of that part of the story. Well, from that time on, this wealthy fellow started to lose his money. Little by little, he went down and down to the point where he had to sell his house, to the point where he became really poor and had to go traveling to raise money to just ask for charity. And he traveled. And he came to Pramishlan, not on purpose, just was on the route. And then he thought, oh, this is where Reb Meir lives. I've got to ask him. That was so peculiar, that incident where he sent me that letter. So he goes in and he says, he identifies himself and he says, you sent me that letter years ago. Why did you send it to me? And Reb Meir said, why do you think you had the money? Where do you think the money came from? The money came to you because you're supposed to be like a treasurer to give it out for what HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs. That money was put there for me and others like me to use for the purposes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. That's why you had it. You refused to accede to what I needed to have done with the money, so you lost it. You lost it. There is a Gemara in Brachas, which has a Hasidic interpretation. The first blessing in the Shemona Esrei is about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're mentioned in the first blessing. But the closing of the blessing mentions Abraham only. The question is why the blessing shouldn't close with all three. So there are many answers to that question, but the phraseology of the Gemara is, speaking to Abraham, B'cha chosmim, with you, Abraham, we close the blessing. I think this goes back to the Baal Tanya, if I'm not mistaken. The Hasidic understanding is, when we come to chosmim, ending history, coming to the end of the period of human history, with you, Abraham, we're going to close it. We're going to close it with your midah, with your characteristic, which is chesed. Chesed is loving kindness. It means that whatever you do, look to the social dimension, I'm using my terminology now, so that to see what effect it has on other people around you. Let's take prayer. You're there to the minyan, hopefully, at the right time, and you're davening. Do you ever think, what about the people around me? What effect does my davening have on them? Do I daven out loud, so loud that they can't concentrate? Do I daven so softly that my voice doesn't contribute to the sound of the davening, which inspires people? What about my bodily motion? I see people who pace. They pace up and back. I think at the very least they should ask themselves, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? There's a Eretz Zuta which says, don't be different from everybody else. Now, there are places where everybody paces. Okay, that's the custom of the place. But don't be different from everybody else. Meaning, if you're going to be different, you need a reason. Otherwise, the default is do what everybody else is doing. So when you're praying, you think to yourself, well, in addition to everything else, singing Lachadadi, right, Friday night. You think to yourself, what effect is it having on the people around? Because the spiritual gifts that I have were given to me for the sake of what I can do for others. I want to make this point by contrasting Torah with Lahavdil, another religion, where you see that the Torah's point of view, there are alternatives and that the Torah rejects them. Now, every religion has 100 expositors and they all disagree as what the religion means. I'm talking about one thing that I read about one religion. So if your background in the religion is different, fine. No complaints either way. In Buddhism, Buddha is described as having achieved a certain unparalleled state of meditation, nirvana, where his ego disappears and he's in touch with the universe and all the things that they write about this ideal state of mentality, which all the later centuries are trying to implement to the extent that they can. And then they have a theological problem. And the problem is, once he achieved that perfect state of consciousness, why did he leave it? Why did he descend from it to talk to other people, to teach other people, to inspire other people? Why didn't he just stay there? That for them is a problem. Why didn't he just stay there? First, the question doesn't start. If you achieved something, you achieved it only because you were meant to use it to do something for others. That's the reason that you achieved it in the first place. They don't have that concept. So they don't have that concept. They have to face this very difficult question as to why it was abandoned. In the Akedah, when Kadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu to sacrifice Isaac, so the text says that the four of them, Abraham and Isaac and the two servants, left and traveled to Moriah, where the mountain was. And then it says that Abraham and Isaac went up the mountain together. And then there was a certain conversation between them, and it says again, they went together. It doesn't say that the four of them went together when they left. It says the two of them went together twice in a 10-minute period. And then, when Abraham comes down from the mountain, because the story only says that Abraham came down, it says he and the two servants went together to Beersheba. So obviously, something important is being told to us throughout. And what it says about going up the mountain together, I've explained when I talked about the Akedah and so on and so on. But the last one, when Abraham comes down and he says they went together with the servants to Beersheba, the question is, he just participated in one of the world's greatest spiritual successes. He was asked to sacrifice his son. He was ready to do so. He took the knife to do so. The angel from heaven appeared to him and said, because you've done this thing, God promises you all sorts of greatness in the future. After having accomplished this, can he be together with the servants? Or has he been spiritualized out of that kind of relationship with servants? The text goes out of its way to tell you that he can be together with the servants. That's a symptom of the same idea. And by the way, although I'm saying this in part because I thought of it myself, I saw it in the writings of Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, in his commentary in the Siddur, and I was very happy when I saw it because he was a great Talmud Chacham. So then the idea is that Abraham looks at it as, I achieved this great trust in God and closeness to God. Of course I can be together with the servants, because that's why I achieved it, to lift everyone up. I don't know if in Malava Malka you say the things in the Siddur that are associated with Malava Malka, but in it there's a statement from the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan says that every place that you find the Kodesh Baruch Hu's greatness, you find his anova. Now anova is translated usually as humility, which isn't a bad translation. There are nuances in the Hebrew that aren't in the English, but that's always true with translation. And if you look at the cases that are brought from all three sections of the Tanakh, you'll find that what's described as the Kodesh Baruch Hu's humility is this. He is transcendent and infinite and spiritual and the creator and so on. And even so, he takes note of and cares for and guides the lives of the people on the very bottom of the social ladder. The very bottom of the social ladder. Comes out that the idea of humility, of anova, includes, I wouldn't say it's the whole definition, but it includes the idea people think of themselves as on a certain level, a certain status. That can be because of your profession. I'm a surgeon. Or it can be because of your experience. I've climbed the 10 highest mountains in the world, and there are only 16 people who can say that, and therefore I'm special. Or because of the knowledge that you have, I've mastered all of ancient hieroglyphics or something else. And once you put yourself on that status, then you naturally relate to people on a status that you think of as equal, and you look up to and try to attach yourself to people who have higher status, and you look down on people with lower status, and it's a compromise for you. It's a kind of mini disgrace for you to have to interact with and deal with people on a lower status. This happens to people of all different kinds. Maybe the clearest example of this that I know of anyway in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, is a story of Esther where Haman is the vice president, is the viceroy of the king, and he's very rich, and he has he's the prime minister. The prime minister of the king, and he's very rich, and he has a big family, and he has all sorts of success, and Mordechai won't bow down, and he's absolutely enraged by that, and he wants to kill Mordechai, but he doesn't. Why not? The text is explicit, because he'll look like he's enraged by something that should be trivial and inconsequential. A Jew? You're worried about what a Jew does? A Jew thinks? What's the matter with you? You wouldn't notice an ant walking across the street, would you? Why would you notice a Jew? So he can't do it. As evil as he is, and as crude as he is, he can't go after Mordechai. So he concocts a plan to annihilate the whole Jewish people. That's a political action. That's an action that affects the kingdom. It's going to have the king's seal on it. That's something that's worthy of a prime minister to do. But to look at a Jew, it's below his station to take notice of and be motivated by something that's so trivial. This is the idea of the opposite of humility, which is pride. It is to resist looking at those who are below you. That's why it says the Kodesh Baruch Hu's anova is that he does that, even though if you're talking about pride, and by the way, in Shir Hayam, in the Song of the Sea, Kodesh Baruch Hu is described as Ga'oga, Gava. It's described there, whatever it means when it comes with respect to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So if anything could have a position that couldn't be matched And because it couldn't be matched, would justify not looking at those below. The creator of the universe has it in infinity. And he cares for the smallest of the small. This is something that we have to take into account in the same way. That if I have a certain status, it's not because I achieved it. It's because the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave it to me. And then I have to think, why did he give it to me? He gave it to me because it's something with which I can help make the world a better place, which is done most directly by helping Jews serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's the most powerful way to make the world a better place. And that being the case, the fact that he gave it to me is a responsibility that I have to use it. Another example. I hope you appreciate the tremendous variety of dimensions of which this idea plays itself out. The Rabbi Yonah writes in the Shari Tshuva, the idea of tshuva, the fact that the Kodesh Baruch Hu made tshuva available for us, is something that creates an obligation on us. And he gives the following parable. He says, imagine a prison which has a chief jailer, and people are locked up in cells. And there are keys to the cells and keys to the main door of the prison. And one night, he makes it clear that he's leaving, and he's leaving the keys behind. And he's leaving the keys in a place where the prisoners could get it. Okay, so he leaves. So, one of the prisoners gets the keys, and he unlocks his door, and starts unlocking the other doors, unlock the main door, and they all run for it. Except one prisoner. One prisoner decides to stay. So the chief jailer comes back in the morning, he sees that prisoner sitting in his cell, and he takes out a whip and starts beating him. Why are you beating me? Because I left the keys. Didn't you understand that if I left the keys, I wanted you to run? Why did I leave the keys? I let you know I left the keys. I want you to run. You didn't command me to run. Well, how dumb are you? That's why I did it. Says Rabbi Yonah, that's why there's an obligation to do tshuva. Because Baruch Hu said, here are my mitzvahs. You failed. You didn't do this mitzvah. You're subject to a liability because you didn't do it. You're subject to a punishment because you didn't do it. But I gave you a key to the prison. I gave you tshuva as a way to repair. That wasn't just meant as, if you want to repair yourself, repair yourself. And if you don't. It's up to you, like the Minchas Chinuch tries to explain the mitzvah of tshuva. Just a procedure, and it's up to you. Says Rabbi Yonah, on the contrary, if I am the one who's going to levy the punishment, and I gave you the keys to the prison so you can get out of it and avoid the punishment, I expect you to use it. So everything that we receive from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to ask how it should be used, and that includes the abilities that we acquire. The question is how to use them. And the last thing I want to say is that a certain amount of care has to be exercised in this project. This is a yeshiva, Baruch Hashem, for Bali Tshuva. People are becoming more observant, more knowledgeable, and it is common for people who are making this journey to think, what about my family? My family, my parents, my siblings. If anybody, certainly, because Baruch Hu put me in a position where I know more about Yiddishkeit, understand more, I should certainly make an effort to help my family, to bring them on board, to inspire them to change, and to grow, and to learn, and to commit themselves. And I think that the danger here is that the truth is two sides. Yes, there's an obligation, but no, usually you're not able to fulfill the obligation, certainly not now. It has to be done with extreme delicacy, with extreme subtlety. You wouldn't be surprised to hear that when you try to tell your parents what to do, what goes through their minds is, we diapered you. You're going to tell us what to do with our lives? Really? Well, I'm 19 already. You're 19, and I'm 45. As one of my first wife's mother said to her daughter, I have been 17, but you have not been 45. So, I know where you are. I know where you're coming from, and I've been there, done that, and they don't want to hear from you. An older sibling, typically, I'm 3 years older than you are. I'm 3 years ahead of you in college, so you're going to tell me what to do. A younger sibling, you're making your own decisions, aren't you? You're choosing your own path in life? Don't tell me how to choose my path in life. People typically don't want to hear from you, especially if you're preaching, this is true, this is right, this is what must be done. So yes, you should care about your parents and family. You should pray for them, no question about it. If they ask you a question, you should answer them, but only give the minimal answer. Don't add in, and here are 3 books to read if you really want to find out. So no, don't do that. Don't push them. You have to be very careful about it. It's one thing to acknowledge the responsibility. It's another thing to judge that you're in a position where you can fulfill the responsibility in an appropriate way. The Chazon Ish said that the mitzvah of tochacha, of reproving other people who are failing in certain ways, largely doesn't apply because we don't know how to do it. We're just not subtle enough, psychologically and socially, to do it in the way that the Torah wants it to be done. And therefore, like the Gemara says, just as a mitzvah to say what will be heard, so it's also a mitzvah not to say what will not be heard. And very often these things will not be heard. So when you're thinking about how to use the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you, you have to be self-conscious and self-critical as to appreciate when and where you can actually use them. We had some experiences here in the yeshiva which, let's put it this way, were quite disappointing. One fellow who came in from a good university, I think it was from Yale, in fact, came I think on a Tuesday, and he stayed for Shabbos. And Shabbos morning, he woke up at around 10:30, and that was the time to go to eat. So he came down and he went to the dining room to eat, and he was told, you don't eat without washing your hands. Oh, okay, these guys believe in hygiene, Okay, so he goes to wash his hands. No, with a cup. Wash your hands with a cup. This way. 3 times, like this. Do it like this. In 2 hours, he was out of there. Out of here. He was gone. These people are absolutely nuts. No soap! Just wash your hands with a cup. Right? Weinbach gave a whole shiur them. One fellow, Weinbach, gave a shiur on motarot. That's luxuries that you shouldn't get used to. Luxuries and become dependent upon luxuries. And when the shiur was over, one of the students came up to him and said, "Is it okay to have a glass of Coke?" Okay, I applaud the student's attitude. What are luxuries? How do they apply? How much? But it's very naive. He wasn't talking about a glass of Coke. He was talking about a Lexus, he was talking about living a life of leisure, a glass of Coke sometimes what you need to pick you up. So you have to realize that these gifts that you're given to be used for others, to think twice about how to use them for others. And so I say this applies like across the board. I knew 2 examples in the case of marriage, then I'm going to quit because I'm going to have a minute. One woman came, I'm trying to remember if it came to me or came to one of the other rabbis, and she said, "I've discovered something terrible about my husband." Okay, they're both Baalei Tshuva, they're only married 2 years. What could it be? Could be anything. He's running guns for the Palestinians, or who knows what. No, he's corresponding with friends that he had in high school, and they're not religious. It's her husband with male friends that he had in high school. He's corresponding with them, just keeping in touch. That shocked her because she didn't come from a Baltula family. I said to Balaji, I made a mistake. She came from a frum background. So now, she at least came to the rabbi. So what do I do about this? Instead of saying, let's get divorced. I didn't marry someone who's corresponding with non-religious people. She asked how to deal with it. That's a way of finding the correct strategy with which you can actually have an appropriate effect on another person. And that's extremely, extremely important. Maybe the last thing I'll say about this, because it's socially, politically important. If you're going to use the gifts that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave you to have an effect on other people, of course, do it the way the halacha says. Very often when people get into the idea that I want to affect others, and the halacha restricts some of their means to be able to do it, they bend the halacha so as to be able to have a bigger effect. There are places which run events, and they put out the numbers. We had 150 for this and 250 for that. And when you look into the means that they used, the means are really not kosher. And then the thing to say is, you had 150, Kodesh Baruch Hu didn't want you to have that 150. And therefore, it's not going to be what he wants. Will it look good on your application for more money from the funding agency? Yeah, it'll look good. But that's not what he wants. So the bottom line is, since we're here to do what Kodesh Baruch Hu wants, that's what we have to use in all of these efforts. But the overriding idea is what we started with. The Beis Hillel says we like the menorah in ascending order, because that's the way in which the miracle has an effect on us. Not like Beis Shammai to signify how much miracle oil you have in the menorah, but what the effect that the miracle has on us. So, yeah.